Alright, so now I have made it clear, the most important thing is how to deal with project constraints. We will now talk about the project, program, portfolio, and OPM as well. Talking about projects and strategic planning, let's get started with project and strategy planning first. Typically, what happens when you talk about a program is that it is always made up of multiple projects. A portfolio, on the other hand, would have projects and programs put together. That's how everything is aligned with organizational goals, objectives, or whatever strategic plan has been created. I gave you this example. If you want to manufacture the cheapest car, and if that is a vision or high-level strategic plan that has been created, then you might need to run multiple such programs and projects because it is a complex project altogether, right? You will have to run multiple projects, and this program would include a lot of components in it. A component could be vendor management activities that need to be separately handled. There could be activities related to establishing a plan for the assembly line where the car would be manufactured. For that matter, there could be another component altogether for sourcing the material required at the cost we are looking for. That's another component altogether. Based on these components, you would then form various projects within these. For example, setting up the assembly line could be a project in itself. Procuring materials or sourcing vendors to procure materials just in time could be another project in itself. So that's what typically happens. You have some strategic guidelines. You have a strategic vision or a plan that triggers various projects and programs, and then all of those become part of the ultimate portfolio. At that level, the overall governance is managed. Program and project management ensure that programs and projects are managed in the right way. That is very important. The most important thing is that you need to categorize these programs. For example, similar types of projects should be part of the same program. Of course, we will take examples as we go ahead, but portfolio management aligns with portfolios. What we can do is take an example, and then you will be in a position to understand better. We can come back and see exactly what we mean to say. This particular example is to understand the difference between projects, programs, and portfolios. At a portfolio level, what you are basically deciding is your strategic plan. For instance, you may be planning to set up a new line of business in the organization. Strategically, that is what you have decided, so you could run a market research project for that. Would it be feasible to go ahead and set up a new line of business altogether? You conduct a market research activity, which is a separate project in itself. Now, if you look at the kind of programs that might need to be created under this portfolio, one of them would be marketing. Since you are setting up a new line of business, you need to think about how you are going to market it. You also need to consider application development as a separate component altogether. Then, content development would also be a key aspect. So you would run these 3 different programs, and under these 3 different programs, there could be multiple projects running. For example, under marketing, you might have a product launch as a separate project altogether. All activities related to the product launch would be carried out under this project. New market development would be another project in itself. A couple of related projects that are linked would then be clubbed under this component, which is marketing as a program. Similarly, for application development, you would consider various aspects, such as web applications, Android applications, and iOS-based applications. Related projects under application development would be grouped into this program. This ensures that, upon completing these 3 projects, the application development program as a whole is completed. Similarly, in the case of content development, you would need to organize content projects. These projects could be classified based on content categories, Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and Class 4 content, for example. This is just one example of structuring a portfolio. There are multiple ways to do this, but this approach provides better visibility and an opportunity to establish proper governance at the portfolio level. This way, you can control what is happening in each of these projects and programs. If we talk about operations, operations focus more on ongoing activities. Operations come into the picture once a product is launched. For example, once the application is built and launched, operations take over. Until then, you are working within the project or program itself. Projects and operations may intersect, and this is very important to understand. Once a product or service is launched into the market, the operations team takes full control, handling support, enhancements, and customer service. Thus, while operations take over after launch, the project and program management aspects are crucial in the development phase. So I hope this example must have given you a fair idea about the program, project, and how a typical strategic plan initiates the launch of a program and a project. Project, program, and portfolio are clarified. The portfolio is typically at a strategic level. This is where the collection of projects or programs happens. We have just taken one example here, and they are basically grouped together so that we can facilitate them effectively from an overall governance and management point of view, which will ultimately help in achieving the strategic objective. In the earlier example, the strategic objective was to launch a new line of business. That's how a program works. It collects projects together, and they are definitely interrelated or sometimes interdependent as well. But most importantly, they obtain benefits that are not available from individual components. For example, only a web application will not provide as much benefit as when you add the Android and iOS apps. When they are put together, then application development as a program will deliver much more benefits. Multiple interrelated projects need to be run parallel. Sometimes they are executed in parallel, and other times they are dependent on each other. They could be run in series or parallel. Projects are generally dependent on each other and serve a common outcome. For example, let's say Class 1 and Class 2, there could be some dependency between them in terms of content, baselining, or delivery. Similarly, there could be a dependency between what you are developing as a web application and then Android and iOS. Generally, that's what is observed within the project. We need to ascertain the dependency level and manage it effectively when working on projects and programs. Moving forward, we have covered what a project, program, and portfolio are, using one example to differentiate them. As we progress, we will take more examples. Now, let's talk about Organizational Project Management, OPM. OPM is specific to an organization and serves as a framework that integrates project, program, and portfolio management to achieve organizational objectives. This integration ensures that organizational goals are met efficiently. From an application perspective, project, program, and portfolio management knowledge must be applied to meet organizational objectives. For instance, when launching a new line of business, portfolio value decisions must be made, and business impact analyses are conducted. Programs and projects then deliver results, and operations begin. Value performance analysis is carried out from the strategy phase, as value starts coming in only once the new line of business is launched. Programs and projects are part of this process, and the portfolio oversees them. To achieve strategic objectives like launching a new line of business, portfolios align with multiple projects and programs. Once these programs are completed, they can be deployed to production, operations, and support teams. Value generation begins once the product or service is out in the market, and its performance is measured against a business realization or benefit management plan. This is similar to what we discussed earlier, but now we are framing it within the OPM structure. Now, let's move on to the PMBOK guide, since we are discussing PMP certification training. It's important to understand how the PMBOK guide is structured. We previously covered the high-level structure, but there are more details to explore, particularly regarding components, process groups, knowledge areas, and their interconnections. Let's quickly go through each component. The project life cycle consists of a series of phases. For example, in software development, the software development life cycle, SDLC, includes phases such as feasibility assessment, initiation, requirement gathering, analysis, design, development, testing, and deployment. These phases typically occur in sequence. Project phases, on the other hand, consist of logically related project activities. The project life cycle provides a high-level overview, while project phases define specific activities within each stage. So let's take an example here. I'm also going to give you an idea about some of these examples wherever possible. Alright, so starting with, let's say the plan scope management. It is one of the processes that we talked about here, right? Plan scope management is basically one of the knowledge areas that we discussed, and under that, there are inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, as you can see on the screen. These could be the inputs for planning a project charter, then various plans like the quality management plan, project life cycle description, development approach, etc. So these are my inputs to the scope management plan. What tools and techniques can I use when I do the scope management? One is, of course, expert judgment, as well as alternative analysis. As part of this training, we actually take a deep dive and come up with examples in terms of how to do the alternative analysis. We try and cover some of these examples. We actually cover the scope management plan, and I will be telling you guys how the scope management plan looks, what role it should play, what the components of the plan are, and what needs to be added into the plan as well. Similarly, what do we expect out of this process? By the end of this particular process, we should get the scope management plan itself, and we should also get the requirements management plan, right? So this is just one example of the project management knowledge area. Scope management is one of the knowledge areas. This entire PMP training is based on these knowledge areas. We are going to cover all these knowledge areas, and under each one, we will be talking about tools and techniques, inputs, and outputs, right? One example I just gave you. So this covers all the components. Now, talking about the life cycle, as you can see here, the project life cycle would start with initiating the project, then planning, executing the activities, and finally closing the project. This process group, as I said earlier, will be a part of all these phases of the project. For planning, we have to initiate the planning activity, actually perform the planning, then execute that plan, etc., right? That means this is going to be an integral part of the process. There are 10 knowledge areas, such as communications management, stakeholder management, scope management, risk management, etc. We will cover each and every one of these knowledge areas with many examples and actual artifacts. Then, there will be a phase gate, like the example we took earlier, project phases, timelines, etc. So this covers everything that is supposed to be covered as part of the PMBOK guide. So, let's proceed for now. We have the project life cycle and product life cycle. We will quickly take a look at this. The project life cycle consists of different phases, as we already discussed. These include feasibility analysis, design, implementation, etc. The names of these phases can vary based on the industry you are working in. The whole idea of working through these phases is to establish milestones at the end of each phase. For example, when I complete the feasibility phase, I will know whether it is possible to continue working on this project. For instance, if I am working on a product, I need to determine whether there is a market for it as part of the feasibility study. I also need to assess whether the solution I am building is feasible to develop. This feasibility study helps determine if the product can be successfully created. As part of this study, I will evaluate technical feasibility and business feasibility. All these aspects will be covered during this phase. As mentioned earlier, the project life cycle depends on the industry. For example, in the IT software industry, the typical project life cycle includes phases like requirements gathering, analysis, design, development, testing, and implementation. In the pharmaceutical industry, the life cycle will be different. In construction, it will also differ. The industry you are working in determines the exact phases. However, at a high level, these phases provide a framework to work through, helping us achieve milestones and establish project governance. These phases can be done sequentially or may overlap, depending on the nature of the project. If the phases overlap, it is referred to as fast tracking. There are also concepts like fast tracking and crashing, which we will cover as part of the training. Stay tuned. You will be interested to learn that there are two ways to accelerate a project: fast tracking and crashing. We will discuss these in more detail as we proceed. Now, let's also quickly talk about the product life cycle and understand the difference between the project life cycle and the product life cycle. A product life cycle may contain multiple project life cycles. When you create a product for the first time, you undertake a project to launch it. Once the product is launched, its life cycle begins. For example, let's say you initiate a project to introduce the cheapest car in the market. You go through various phases of the project, and eventually, you launch the car. This marks the beginning of the product life cycle. The product life cycle typically consists of several phases. First, the product is introduced to the market. If it is well received, sales grow, and the product enters the growth phase. Over time, competition increases, and the product reaches maturity, where sales peak. Eventually, as competition intensifies, sales start declining. At this point, enhancements slow down, and the product is eventually phased out. During the product life cycle, multiple projects may be undertaken to improve or modify the product. For example, during the growth phase, you may initiate a project to update the car's design to appeal to younger consumers. If necessary, you might launch a project to improve the car's engine. Thus, a single product life cycle can include several projects aimed at maintaining sales and market relevance. This is the key difference between a product life cycle and a project life cycle. Now, let's move on to the next topic: understanding the types of development cycles. Some of you may have already read about different life cycle models or even worked with them. We will briefly cover various types of life cycles and discuss both generic and specific examples. You may have come across life cycle models such as the predictive life cycle and the adaptive life cycle. We will explore these in more detail as we continue. That you would like to have an iteration duration of 2 weeks. So what you will do essentially is that in an adaptive life cycle, you will define the scope of the product that you're building for that 2 weeks. So whatever you think you could complete within 2 weeks, you identify that as the scope and then agree to it. That means you build those features within 2 weeks in the iteration that is agreed upon. Again, in the next iteration, you will pick up the next set of requirements or features. By this method, you will continue building the software. The advantage here is that we have multiple feedback cycles because, at the end of every iteration, we go back to the customer and ask what is good in it, what could be improved, etc. This means we get to adapt as per the requirements or changes given by the customers. Therefore, this is a change-driven life cycle or an adaptive life cycle. This is typically used even in agile projects as well. Now, there is also a hybrid way of working where we do a bit of upfront planning while also responding to the changes that arise in the project. It's a combination of a predictive life cycle, where we do some planning, perhaps for a 1-year project. You plan for 3 months in advance, and at the same time, you build iteratively and incrementally. We also show the demo to the customer, take feedback, and then build or respond to the changes suggested by the customers in the upcoming iteration. This way, you are not only doing the upfront planning but also responding to the changes or suggestions given by the customer. This is truly a hybrid way of working and, therefore, a hybrid life cycle. One example of a hybrid life cycle could be a framework like Discipline Agile, which incorporates some predictive planning while also adapting to the changes shared by the customers. That could be one example of a framework from a life cycle point of view. Now, moving on to the next 2 life cycles, first is iterative. In an iterative life cycle, as far as the project scope is concerned, we determine the project scope early in the project life cycle itself. What typically happens in an iterative life cycle is that we have these iterations, where development happens in cycles and we go about building the product in small chunks. We pick up a small chunk of the product, build it in one iteration, then move on to the next iteration and build the next set of features. This is how we continue building the product over successive increments produced in each iteration. When working in an incremental life cycle, deliverables are also produced through a series of iterations. In both cases, one common aspect is iterations. In an iterative life cycle, we build in cycles. However, in an incremental life cycle, we build upon the previous chunk or increment of the product. For example, if you have to paint the Mona Lisa in an incremental way, you would build it in small chunks. You might begin by painting just the face in one iteration. If there are 3 iterations, after the first one, you will have painted only the face. This becomes your first increment. In the second iteration, you build upon that increment and extend the picture. In the third iteration, you build on the previous increment to complete the painting. This is how you incrementally create the full picture. If it were a software product, you would go on building the features depending on the type of product you're working on. This is the incremental way of working. Now, in an iterative approach, you decide upfront that you will build the picture in 3 iterations. One by one, you enhance the picture in each iteration. For instance, in the first iteration, you create a high-level architecture and design. In the second iteration, you start working on a few features. Then, as you move into the third iteration, you enhance those features further. So, in an iterative way, we build cyclically. We continue refining the work, gathering feedback, and improving it in each iteration. That's how, within 3 iterations, you could complete the picture using an iterative approach. By changing the approach, the way you work changes drastically. When you combine both iterative and incremental approaches, it becomes the best method, because this is what we do in Agile. In Agile, we build incrementally and iteratively. Therefore, the biggest advantage is, I have also built certain features in the first iteration. In the second iteration, again, I'm going to build on the increment that I've created. At the same time, I am also able to prove my target level architecture early during this life cycle, which certainly helps me and gives me better confidence when I move ahead through these iterations. In the third iteration, if you see, actually, I'm even better in terms of my design and architecture overall. At the same time, I could complete my feature as well. Suppose if tomorrow I decide to put this just as face paintings, then I should be able to even do that because that is ready. So this is how I go on just building it in an iterative and incremental way and with continuous feedback. It's going to only help me in responding to the changes that are coming through the customers or the stakeholders. So this is how incremental and iterative ways of working help. If you see the predictive life cycle, if you just remove it at this point in time, then the rest of this life cycle, you'll find, will definitely be used in an agile way, up to hybrid, incremental, iterative, and some part of predictable. So, as I mentioned, especially when we work in a hybrid way, this is about the development life cycles. Now, we are moving to the next topic, which is about phase gate. Now, if you see phase gate, what is a phase gate? We typically work in phases. We are talking about a project, right? So a project will happen through various phases of the project. As a part of the phase gate, what typically happens is that the project performance is always compared with what's documented in various project documents. You will come across documents like the business case, the project management plan, or the benefits management plan. We created certain things there. We may have put up milestones of the project over there, or we may have defined how the benefits would be realized on this project once we deploy it in production, once my customers start using it. So I need to then compare the performance of the project with what is mentioned in these documents. As a part of the phase, that's what I do typically, and these things actually help me in making certain decisions. Let's take a quick example of the project charter or project management plan. You may have put up there, as a part of the project management plan, that you would be completing your requirements gathering within a set start date and end date. What you will get as an output is a requirement specification document. So this is what you have agreed upon as a part of your project management plan under scope management activities. When you proceed with working on the project, we look back and check as a part of the project performance whether we completed the requirement phase or not. When we completed the requirement phase, was my requirement specification document created and approved by the stakeholders or not? Based on the overall progress, we then make certain decisions. For example, whether to continue to the next phase. Depending upon which phase you're working in, if it is a feasibility phase, you just write down some project idea and then start working on it. You assess feasibility, whether you can convert this idea into a product that can be sold in the market. If, at the feasibility stage itself, you realize that this cannot be materialized due to certain reasons, then you may decide not to continue with it, right? So these decisions are taken based on the phase gates. Another decision could be to continue to the next phase. If your idea is going to work and is feasible to be implemented, then you might work on a business case and start working on a project. You then decide to continue working on it and move on to the next phase, where you create a business case and a benefits management plan. The sponsor will create that and then hand it over to the project manager, who will then work on the project charter. Sometimes, the decision could be to end the project. In the middle of the project, if the business objective itself has changed, it might be decided to end the project then and there. For example, if a regulation change initially triggered the project but that regulation is no longer valid, then there's no need to continue working on it. Alternatively, you might remain in the phase and extend it. If you are in the requirements phase and are behind schedule or unable to achieve what you initially planned, you might need to extend the plan. Or you could also repeat the phase or elements of it. You could extend it, or you could repeat it. These kinds of decisions are taken based on the phase gates that we agreed upon and documented. These project documents are definitely important.